What do all high-performing IT organizations have in common? Well, based on the Puppet Labs 2014-2015 State of DevOps report, which is based on the responses of more than 20,000 technical professionals, they have three things in common. Well, first of all, they're more agile. Teams are innovating faster than ever and deploying 30 times more frequently with 200 times shorter lead times these days. Second, they're more reliable. By streamlining their processes and fortifying infrastructure, high-performing teams have 60 times fewer failures and recover a staggering 168 times faster. And third, they're just winning. Teams that practice DevOps typically exceed in profitability and market share and productivity goals. So let's talk about today's situation. We know that we live in an interconnected and rapidly changing world. And today's businesses have multiple tools for productivity and communication and work, and there's new ones popping up every day. The business wants innovation, new technologies, and frequent updates to support competitiveness and rapidly changing business requirements. But at the same time, they also want services to be reliable and stable. And as we all know, change is often the nemesis of stability. The more you change something, the more likely you are to break it. In fact, according to Gartner, 80% of all incidents are due to changes. But who's expected to deliver these more reliable services? Well, development teams, of course, the very ones that are responsible for creating change. Now, agile and lean methodologies changed how we developed software in the early 2000s, and ever since then, developers have been tasked with delivering features faster and more frequently, while IT operations and support have to maintain infrastructure and stability and availability. But customers want both, and really that's where the conflict lies. So to achieve this, we've got to change the way we handle change. IT organizations are tasked with balancing business expectations while keeping everything running, and within the IT organization, IT support teams face several challenges of their own. There's a continuing pressure to improve the relevance of services to the business. IT has to balance the rate of change with stability to ensure that business value is provided. We find that scattered data or lack of information at all levels limits incident and problem understanding. Deployment failures have a high risk of downtime, and all too often, due to lack of communication, changes that are made that IT support doesn't even know about. How many times have we come in the next morning and found out there was some unplanned change the night before that's brought 3 systems down? And duplication of work and redundancy and knowledge gaps and handoff all result in higher IT and business costs. And the feedback from support often well represents the customer's interest, but that doesn't always get communicated to and from the development and product owners and product managers. So ultimately what we find out is that collaboration is really the key to success. IT teams are responsible for customer interactions, and their success depends on the stability and quality of services. It's often the case that development and support teams have different goals and different methodologies, and they work in different management systems. And over time, they tend to become siloed because they have a lack of collaboration, which creates problems through miscommunication and a lack of shared knowledge. So how do we break down these silos and improve collaboration and drive higher business value? Well, IT support and development teams must work together, and with all the other IT functions. That includes development and operations and QA, support, testing, everyone. The DevOps movement was a response by development groups to this very conflict, and it aims to bring all these teams together. IT support needs to understand and adopt these agile and lean and Kanban principles that the development teams have been using for a while now, so that they can continue to support both IT and business services. So what is DevOps? Well, let's dive in and find out. DevOps advocates a collaborative working relationship between development and IT operations, where historically they've been very separated. So development refers to teams that develop and maintain software products and services. Today we'll focus on internal developers maintaining systems and tools that employees use to be productive, like centralized purchasing and CRMs and the like. Operations, on the other hand, refers to teams that deliver and manage and support services and products. So we'll focus today on those IT teams that support internal systems that employees use. So, companies like Netflix and Amazon and Google today are applying these DevOps principles and practices to release faster and maintain a higher quality of services. For example, did you know that Netflix does around 100 releases per day? Not the movie titles, but software releases. So Patrick Dubois, the creator of the term DevOps, said in his blog, DevOps is not about technology. DevOps is about a business problem. The best way to understand DevOps is really distilling it into 3 principles that were popularized by the Phoenix Project. There's the first way that involves system thinking, the second way that involves feedback loops, and the third way, which involves continual experimentation and learning. So the first way is about systems thinking, like we said. When you cultivate a collaborative culture between development and support teams, then you end up shortening the feedback loop necessary to drive that business agility. The functions of a collaborative culture can be further explained by following 3 widely accepted DevOps principles called these 3 ways. So the first way emphasizes the performance of the entire system as opposed to the performance of a specific silo of work or department. DevOps transcends departments and showcases the overall value to the customer. That's a quote from Gene Kim, known to be the father of DevOps. So development teams build and then ship out to operations, fortifying the customer value. Now, the first way is all about shifting our thinking to the entire system from the customer's point of view versus the singular goals of any one little team or department. Some examples of system thinking are things like never passing a known defect downstream, or never allowing local optimization to create global degradation, or just always seeking to increase flow. Flow is very important in all of this. So the second way is around feedback loops. The goal of almost any process improvement initiative is to shorten and amplify feedback loops so that necessary corrections can be continually made. So by improving the feedback between development and operations and support and customers, all of the teams understand their impact to the overall goal. We find that clarity and collaboration between teams breaks down barriers and improves productivity and reduces conflict. So when teams work together from the same feedback loop, communications breakdown just really become a thing of the past. And the third way is around continual experimentation and learning. Creating a culture that fosters 2 things: continual experimentation, which requires taking risks and learning from success and failure, and understanding that repetition and practice is the prerequisite to mastery. So here, this might involve things like allocating time for experiments or creating rituals that reward your team for risk-taking and success. Things like the new approach to these things with gamification are good examples of things like that. So how do we put DevOps into practice for IT support? Well, luckily there's a framework called CALMS. It was coined back in 2010. It includes a focus on culture and automation and lean and measurement and understanding. So let's take that CALMS model and apply it to IT support. So culture, the C in CALMS, is all about daily or weekly rituals that influence how a team works. It's about shifting from silos to constant communication. DevOps is all about agility and speed. And so some examples of rituals that you could apply to your team include things like implementing daily stand-ups or hack days or chat IM solutions that can encourage collaboration, or working within a Scrum or Agile or Kanban framework. It includes things like focusing on results and not just activities. So the key is to not obsess on the number of changes, but to realize that what's important is the result of those changes. It's a good idea to measure everything and then determine improvement based on those measurements. And also culture is around understanding behaviors. Culture is really just a result of habits. So you need to understand how your teams work together so that you know what you can improve on. Automation, the A in CALMS, works when it supports the people and processes in place. So we strive to go from trapped knowledge to shared knowledge. So like known errors should be tracked at the time of deployment and then communicated to support, rather than just passing a known error downstream without saying anything about it. And support should be linking knowledge articles to incidents and problems so that everybody understands what's causing the issues. Automation also includes a shift from orphan tickets to linked tickets. So all teams really need to be responsible for linking tickets and documentation. And that includes the service desk and admins and developers and operation, so everybody knows what's going on. And linking incidents and problems to requests and changes and releases is also important. Automation is also around not just deploying, but then supporting. Continuous integration and continuous delivery and continuous deployment are all core to this first way of DevOps, where we're thinking about the performance of the overall system. So your team needs to be prepared to support and operate and ensure their availability to restore services. They got to know what's being deployed and when so that they can give the right answers to the customer. Things like the ITIL forward schedule of changes construct can be applied here to be sure that everybody's kept in the loop of when changes are being made and what systems they affect. Also help with testing. Automated testing is really key to a DevOps environment. But on top of that, IT support teams hold data about their various customer environments that really needs to be continually fed back to testing. Ultimately, support's on the front lines, so they have first-hand knowledge about everything, and that needs to make it back to the other team so everybody knows what's going on. And finally, keeping up with monitoring data. Support needs to know about any proactive monitoring, and really they should be the ones to provide requirements for that monitoring, so that they can link events back to incidents and problems and changes. So the L in CALMS is for lean. Now the lean approach came out of the automotive manufacturing world, and it focuses on things like eliminating waste, making sure that your processes are simple as they can be. So you look at what's not adding value and then eliminate any duplicate work or unnecessary administration. There's a focus on always improving as well. Continuous improvement in IT support is about constantly iterating on your processes and services so that you're striving to deliver higher value services to the business. And it's important to realize failure is normal. One principle of lean and the third way is understanding that if you're not failing, you're not getting stuff done. What was learned should be the most important thing your team reflects on. So it's a good idea to create rituals of like post-incident or post-mortem reports based on lessons learned that are shared across all of your teams. Things like this is kind of like sprint retrospectives from the agile software development world, but the same kind of concept there, where we do some post digging into what happened so we can determine how we can do it better in the future. So the M in CALMS is for metrics. Now the goal here is to keep track of only the metrics that matter. So we measure things like mean time to repair and whether it increases or decreases over time. We measure repetitive incidents and how often they occur in a period. We measure service level targets and how the service level agreements and operational level agreements work in context of those deployments. And what's the impact of deployments on achieving your goal? And cost. What's the cost per incident along with the total cost of support? You have to take this into context with downtime costs, because in some cases at least, increasing support costs may actually be the best thing to do to minimize the impact of the business. Sometimes with a particular rollout, being able to throw some extra support staff and cost at that can be very helpful. And sharing, the S in CALMS. So when it comes to sharing, you ask yourself questions like, does the organization understand what we're doing? And are we sharing that understanding? And do we all share it? Do teams understand what each other's goals are and what their hardships and priorities are? Teams should be communicating with each other so that they understand where they're coming from and what's important to them and what causes them pain. Do your team's process flow outputs? Did your process outputs flow in with other teams' processes? How well are we dovetailed and streamlined together? And knowledge. What is it that your team knows that they share with others? And if they do, is it in a system and is it accessible? Having a system that's not accessible to the people that need to see that data doesn't really do everyone any good. And questions like, how is your team collaborating with others? And are there unbarred channels for communicating, or is management standing in the way of that? And are the right stakeholders being kept in the loop of your projects, even if they're not in the immediate group? And do your IT groups, like development, operations, testing, and support, and even the business really, share ownership not only in the successes, but also in the failures and learning from those? And tools. Do teams share tools and information? And if not, do those tools integrate with each other? Tool sets are really important there. So how do we define success? Well, success is effective processes, not just efficient processes. You can be very efficient at a broken process, and that really doesn't do anyone any good. The key here is to be sure that your processes are effective. So we need visions and goals that are linked to business outcomes. We need categorizations and tools that enable collaboration. We have to ensure that the tools work together. So getting development and IT support on the same platform is a really great way to do that. We need to realize that incidents and problems and changes are really just part of the IT backlog. And ultimately, what we decide to fix or not fix is based on the organization's needs, not whether a ticket was submitted or not. And we need to continually improve on things like service design and transition and operations. So what are the critical success factors for applying DevOps to IT support? Well, one is focusing on common goals. It's important for all the teams to understand what each other's goals and agree to a list of the same goals, and a sense of urgency. Everybody needs to agree to timelines and objectives, and everyone should be participating in setting those objectives. Culture change. We all need to be using a common vocabulary and doing things the same way. And learning. We should be applying learning to not only processes and automation, but also to even people. And metrics. What should ensure that the goals are set on outcomes, and then we need to measure those goals. So look at what kind of metrics we need. And reinforcing behaviors. We want to reward and recognize teams as a way of reinforcing good behaviors. And again, that gamification approach that's kind of new is a great way to begin doing that. So like Dick mentioned earlier, RightStar is an Atlassian partner, the solution vendor who provides a DevOps-focused platform that joins both ALM, the Application Lifecycle Management, with ITSM, the IT Service Management, together, with products like Jira Software and Jira Service Desk and Confluence and HipChat and Bitbucket. So I wanted to take some success stories with their solutions and how two companies used Atlassian to succeed. So both of these companies have brought their development support teams together using the Jira platform. The first one I want to talk about is Puppet Labs, which has shown great improvement in resolving tickets. So Puppet Labs was a small tech startup that turned into a venture-backed company with about 300 employees. And when that growth occurred, they found themselves at a real crossroads. They needed to scale up to support their channels while maintaining service levels. The Puppet Labs IT manager, Nick Cunningham, noted that since deploying Jira Software, they've had their resolved tickets increase by almost 67%, which is a sign that their help desk team is actually able to get more work done. Today, all 300 employees at Puppet Labs are supported by Jira Service Desk. Mr. Cunningham also noted that with Jira Service Desk and the entire Atlassian stack, they've been able to increase their user adoption by staying in the same system, streamline their maintenance processes, and they reduced their total costs for and labor for maintaining all those systems. So with the Atlassian product, Puppet Labs was able to streamline its workflows and add critical efficiencies and provide help to their customers that their customers needed quickly. So our second success story is with a company called Skyscanner. So millions of people book trips using Skyscanner's global search engine every day. So with those thousands of searches in the engine happening every second, it's really no surprise that they take defects in their software really seriously. So to streamline the defect reports that came in, they really needed a new kind of service desk. Michael Hall, Skyscanner's business tools lead, stated that they're building better software by fixing bugs twice as fast since implementing Jira Service Desk. So today there's 700 employees that are spread across 9 global offices are helping improve their global search engine with Jira Service Desk. So he also noted that their end user customers actually get email updates from the system. So the end user customers know when their problems are fixed, and they can understand their impact on product improvement. So again, with Atlassian, Skyscanner can now focus on individual interactions, and they're no longer limited by tools. So in conclusion today, faster, better service is about culture and sharing and tools that enable your teams. A collaborative culture ultimately is critical to the success in DevOps. By aligning support and development, you help your organization understand what services the business wants and needs to be productive. So what should our takeaway be from today? Well, first, use DevOps principles for IT support processes. Begin today by starting to apply the 3 ways of DevOps and comms to your IT support team. And second, emphasize teamwork and collaboration to get Dev and Ops under the same roof. By emphasizing collaboration through training and incentives, like simulation training that Dick mentioned, or the gamification. By measuring everything, and consider starting with benchmark studies, so you know where you started, so you know where your improvement will be. And by moving the disparate Dev and Ops support systems together, so that they're using the same system. So we've reached a time here where we can take some questions.
Sure. Okay. Well, great job, Alan. I certainly appreciate that. Good talk. And now would be a good time if you have a question to use the Q&A box, and you can just type it in, and we'll get to it as soon as we can. There's already some questions that have come in. One thing I mentioned when I started out, we were talking about The Martian. Well, another favorite book of mine is The Phoenix Project. And, of course, Alan mentioned Gene Kim, who's the author of that. It's a real page-turner. It's a fiction book, but it certainly really hits home, I know, especially to a lot of those in either IT or in the development side. And Gene Kim is the lead author on another book that just came out called The DevOps Handbook. It just came out about a month ago, and I would highly recommend that as well. They spent a lot of time, lots of good takeaways in that book as well. And one of the, Alan, if you just go back one slide, one of the takeaways that you had today was using DevOps principles for IT support processes. Well, a lot of us, especially that have been in consulting for a while, will work hard, will maybe implement a tool set, and then the darn users don't want to move forward. They like it the old way, or they say this is a little bit too convoluted. And what kind of comes to mind is change management. And oftentimes, we've heard complaints before saying that, hey, the change management process is so complicated that it takes longer just to put in the request than it does to actually do the change. And so therefore, we're not going to use the system. And that's exactly what you don't want to have happen. And one DevOps principles would be, well, let's make this more of an agile request, and maybe we can rush some of these changes in. It certainly depends on what the change is, and so that you can circumvent the full process, and maybe it could be like an emergency change request in order to make IT support more of an agile process. Then, so that's another good example. But anyway, let's take a look at some of the questions. The first one here is, and you talked a little bit, I guess, about sharing and collaboration. And then so somebody asked here, what is the big deal with chat tools like HipChat and Slack? What's wrong with email? And that's certainly if you've been around for a long time, you're just used to using email. What are we seeing? What's our experience, or what can you say about some of these tools, these chat tools that are out there?
Well, I personally had the same objection. You know, I've been working in email since '97 or something like that,
Right.
and it's hard to pull someone's cold dead hands off of a tool. But ultimately, there's some better options for that, and it's great if you can get team members to participate and give feedback at all. So ultimately, it's good to take it however you can get it. But email is often not really the most efficient way to communicate. So using a professional chat software like HipChat or Slack, like you mentioned, can really change your team's communication style. And users tend to love the easy-to-use communication tools and flexibility, and that it can be asynchronous or synchronous. I can drop a message off and chat and let it be picked up later for someone to reply to, or we can be in an actual instant message sort of situation. And one of the great things about the chat tools is the integration possibilities with other third parties tools and apps. So most of them come with standard integration options with leading project management tools. Like HipChat, for example, is thoroughly integrated with the entire Atlassian stack, which means that all the notifications from these tools are directly displayed inside of the chat groups and channels and rooms. So that comes in really handy when you don't have to switch between all the tools.
Okay, well that's good. I certainly enjoyed the discussion around DevOps, and oftentimes when you think of DevOps, you think of a system to sort of shorten the software development lifecycle. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Oh yeah, like sort of how does DevOps make things quicker?
Right.
Well, using the tools and techniques of DevOps, smoothing out communication and collaborating between software developers and other stakeholders tends to lead to better integration and more automation and a complete picture of what's going on for all the stakeholders to measure and monitor against. So specifically, things like automation reduces time waste, and you can reduce time waste also by reducing the time waste around handoffs and task switching by using well-integrated tools like we talked about for collaboration and automatic deployment. There's a concept of motion to the physical movement of a person from one place to another place in order to share or discuss or interact with other team members. You can shorten that by using tools that allow for smoother information sharing, and especially those that are context-based. You can reduce the overhead processes within the development cycle, the ones that place extra burden on the team, then don't add any value or much value. So it's always a good idea to carefully evaluate each step in the software development cycle to be sure that any step that you have in there that has little value is either eliminated or shortened. You can reduce the number of extra features or functionality built into the software, the ones that again offer very little or no value. So they're just contributing to waste and effort. A problem that some teams have is partially completed work. All stories at the end of an iteration need to be brought to a logical closure as soon as possible within the iteration itself, really. Because anytime you miss doing that or have incomplete functionality that has to get tested later, the cost of fixing that at that time ends up being a lot higher than if it were earlier in the process. And just using a unified ALM platform across the various teams and third parties so that everybody's in the same system, helps you to begin to align the teams and collaborate and share dependent information, as well as just providing a unified platform to connect with business leads and system analysts and project managers and all that. So does that get at part of that question?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was great. You mentioned, here somebody is asking about, because I think you mentioned a Kanban board. What exactly is a Kanban board?
Yeah, I mentioned that and really didn't define it. So it's a work and workflow visualization tool. It's intended to enable you to optimize the flow of your work. So there's sort of two approaches with that. Originally, there were physical Kanban boards or Kanban, I believe you can say it either way, where people used sticky notes or cards on a whiteboard to communicate status and progress of their issues. But now there's also online Kanban boards that draw from that same whiteboard metaphor, but in a software setting, so that it's sort of all virtual. They typically use a basic three-step, to do, in progress, and done. But since every team has their own processes for completing work, really Kanban gives you the freedom to map your own processes, your own workflow too.
Okay. And I guess, some other terms that are bandied about a lot are sprints and epics then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are sort of make up sort of the cornerstones of agile software development. Could you describe that a little bit too?
Yeah, that's those are terms that get tossed around that I'm not sure, at least if you're not living and breathing it, maybe everyone's familiar with. So an epic is really something so big that it won't fit into a sprint. Now, sprints are typically a 2-week, often a 2-week thing, but can be 1 or 3 or 4 or some custom duration. But an epic, for whatever time frame your iteration is something that won't fit into a single iteration. It's typically not clearly understood in terms of customer requirements, and needs to be broken down into stories. Epics are often estimated in the T-shirt sizing of sort of saying this thing is going to take somewhere between X and Y iterations to do all this work. And epics are typically defined up front during the initial product road mapping, and then it's later that they get decomposed into stories that are put in the product backlog. But the story, on the other hand, is something that's actionable and small enough to fit in a sprint. And they're typically estimated with story points as opposed to those T-shirt sizing things. And they're really intended to deliver like a vertical slice of functionality to the customer that's valuable and complete, so that there's something completed to hand over at the end of each iteration that's actually usable. And they can be created up front as well, but they typically are created throughout product development, even though a good bit of it happens in the time leading up to the iteration, the planning for the actual sprint.